Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today's session is called Managing Gen Z and Multi-Generational Workforce. It sounds clinical, like we're here to diagnose some sort of a problem, but maybe the problem isn't generational difference. Maybe it's the way we talk about it. We've been sold a story lately. Conscious unbossing is apparently the trend that comes out from global north, where people talk about millennials are walking away from mid-management jobs. They don't want to manage other people. Gen Z doesn't want your promotions. And managing across these generations is a crisis, not a conversation. Much of that story comes from places with aging workforces and shrinking growth in terms of economic growth, of course. But here in India, more than 65% of our population is under 35. We are not aging, we are coming off age. So India adds population of New Zealand every week to its count. And every hour, more than 2,000 Indians approximately migrate from rural towns to urban centers. Maybe it's from Bihar to Bangalore, Nagpur to Noida, arriving not just with job aspirations, but with their own vocabulary, their identity, their ambition and change or appetite for change. So the real question should be, isn't about how we manage these cohorts. Maybe the question should be whether we are ready to let go of the templates that were never designed for these cohorts to begin with. At Let's Talk, we are not here to decode generational demographic insights like it's some sort of a UX problem. We are here to reflect, to challenge, and maybe to reframe the conversation through more local and lived-in lens. And to do that, we've brought together a panel of three people. And in what we do every time there is an emergency is that we pivot. So we've had a last minute cancellation, but we've had one of our panel members who've just very generously accepted this challenge to come and join us for this conversation today. So let me introduce the panel to you. We do have Professor Ruchi Tiwari. She's Associate Dean and Chief Marketing Officer at MICA, the School of Ideas, based in Ahmedabad. MICA is a place where culture, communication, creativity collide, and Ruchi sits at the intersection of academia and industry, helping shape the next generation of storytellers, strategists, change makers. And her lens on youth is not abstract because it's lived, it's researched, it's reflected through the years of practice and mentoring students who don't just think differently. They also, I'm sure, expect different things from the generations who have been there before. We've joined by Ganesh Aaithal, who is a strengths coach and a learning leader at Accenture. People who don't know, Accenture is a mammoth in India. Ganesh, correct me with the numbers. I guess globally, you're about 700,000 workforce.
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah. So I am an alum of Accenture. So Accenture doesn't just employ generations, it scales across them, and not just in one geography, in different geographies. So Ganesh's work he works with leaders now to help them navigate complex organizational change, helping them understand people not as static types, but as shifting landscapes of values, experiences, and skills. His work focuses on strengths, not stereotypes, and that's exactly why we need his voice here today. And Tejaswini, I've just made her acquaintance like a few minutes ago, so I don't have it prepped for me, but true to form, you are going to be a representative of the younger generation. So why don't you introduce yourself? If I could give you the floor, please.
Hi, afternoon, everybody. First of all, that's a very huge thing to say that I'll be representing my generation. Our generation doesn't even represent themselves, to be very honest. We believe in self-identity and self-proclamations of identity. So I'm just representing myself here, not my generation. Maybe the work ethic may be a little bit here. So yeah, I'm Tejaswini. I was just a postgraduate student 2 months back. I've not done what am I, who am I in almost since 8th grade. So it's a tough question. I work with Ruchi ma'am. I work with her. I am a medical anthropologist by my educational training. And this is my first real job. And I'm not sure how am I doing with it. So that's it. I don't know what else to tell about myself here.
That is one hell of an introduction. Amazing, Tejaswini. I can only project onto your image, right? So I'm like, when I was in your position, I would have stumbled and fumbled. And then I would have had a lot of questions about how am I looking? What am I doing? Am I coming across a specific way or not? But kudos to you. Thank you for joining us today. If I could bring Ruchi ma'am on. Ruchi ma'am, I don't know where that came from, but Ruchi, if I could ask you to come on in, and you've been firsthand, you have seen firsthand how Gen Z and millennials shape what they expect from leadership, education, and workplace. You work with them, you teach them. How are institutions adopting to this shift in your perspective?
So first, of course, there are two parts and I'll deal with them differently. First, of course, is education and its role in shaping generations. And that I feel is a very classic, it's a very established, deep founded purpose. And I think that stakes. Now, the second and the more important part is, which is more transactional, whom am I dealing with? What am I preparing them for? What do they know? What are their aspirations? And that is, and I believe so, is an ever-changing process. And I feel we'd never need education at all if that was static. So for me, and I've been teaching for a long while, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of other people who are in this profession, it is so gradual, it is so everyday, that you really have to hold yourself and think back to say, okay, what was my first batch of student like? Otherwise, it's an ever evolving daily activity. You are growing with them, you're changing with them, and therefore a part of you is them and a part of you is not them. So sometimes you wonder, are you really teaching them or have you got trained in the process? That's the large philosophical bit, as I will put. But some things distinctly change. For example, this whole hierarchy business that was there in, I am assuming, any institution, and distinctly in educational institutions, that's dead. It's not there. So we're more conversational. The student and a teacher relationship has pivoted to becoming clearly a facilitator and a learner relationship. So it's a more partnership, it's a more collaborative process. And if you're a true educator, believe me, Nilesh, it's just victory all the way, because you are only guiding them. All material, everything that was once your asset is now democratized. Everybody has access to it. You only have to give them the navigation pathways, and a lot of times you have to be there to give them this faith that you can do it. And that's very typical of this generation, both ways. You can see them highly motivated and highly demotivated with just the kind of stimulus that they receive from their environment around. So this receptivity and response is definitely something that I've seen changed. So there was higher plasticity earlier and there's higher elasticity now. And that's one change. So I remember, and the generation earlier than this, we called ourselves resilient, but I also felt that that led to plasticity. And the current generation, we call them fragile. But I also feel that they're more adaptive, they're more flexible, and maybe the start of taking a new form is to break down, is to come out as fragile. But I also feel that a lot of them are willing to recreate, reshape, restart. Privileges like that weren't available, or the previous learners never took that. I mean, and I'll close at that note.
Two things that stood out to me. You mentioned, you're referring that previous generations or other previous cohorts specifically demonstrated plasticity. So were they more adaptable? They had bigger capacity to take on more. So how do you define plasticity? Because I can say elasticity is about being fungible, stretchable. So I get that. I can relate to that. But when you talk about plasticity, is it just about capacity or is it about ability to find more information? What was it?
Plasticity to me is just being in a box frame, and I don't know whether it was fear or just that there wasn't enough, or it was being risk averse, or that there were few options, or that you couldn't take chances, or that the social system gave you too many milestones to achieve. So you would never look out of the box. So you were definitely there There were blinders on, and anybody who wanted to break out of that had to face a lot of judgment. You knew that your chances to fail were minimal or no. It was an in and out choice.
Amazingly put, Ruchi. Thank you so much for contextualizing that, because, it's about when you say that, box, it becomes that much more easy. And then you use another word, molding. So, of course, mold, you have to break out of a mold to be able to, carve a path for yourself. So I can definitely vouch for that, because I've firsthand experienced how careers were shaped back in the day when I was growing up. My aunt couldn't change a career from nursing to something else because she was put down that path and she had to go through it. Let's pivot a little bit and come to couple of words. So, Ganesh, in your experience, we hear, constant claims about generational gaps, but many of them collapse when you scrutinize them a little bit. So I was referencing to these insights and trends that come out of different data sets, specifically from Western countries, that specifically talk about demographic reality in a way that reflect on the data that they've collected. I don't think places like this come to India and do a bit of first-hand data gathering to say that this is contextualized for India as well. So when you work for a global giant like Accenture, where you support a lot of their appetite for knowledge across different locations, where do you see real difference? And where are we simply projecting myths onto our population or our age, and where actually it sits and sticks?
Okay. So from my experience, I must say that some part of it is a myth, some part of it is exaggerated. Okay. While what I see reality, if you see some things, there's a real gap, I think it could be in the area of when it comes to technology fluency. Yeah, that is some gap I see here and there. And workplace expectation is another one, is something which I also see as a gap. And communication style, or what do you say, communication preference is also another thing. Or the most recent one is, because since I'm in the learning space, I think it is to do with learning preferences. Now informal way of learning, where some generation of people at organization, depending on the leadership level, or depending on what position that they hold. Some people love long workshops, while the current generation likes bite-sized learning. Like when I say bite-sized, it's called micro-learning. Like something which we recently got into is something like a fast 15 call. So a fast 15 call is where 15 minutes, you just give them 2-3 slides, talk about it, and they are like, they just want to listen to that, and they're, want to apply that somewhere. So these are the kind of things which we could, at least I've seen in the recent past that we have applied. So these are few things that, at least from my experience, that I've seen, at least while coaching teams using their strength. Most often people are not aware what to do with their strengths. And when we say it's a strengths report that is done within the first 15 days that they join the organization, but after that, what next? So sometimes, you would see leaders who use their own priorities. When we say priorities, it is workplace priorities, that is what they focus. Whereas, the generation people, the current generation that comes in, they want their priorities to be focused more on wellness, and more like mental well-being and things like that. So that is sometimes, I see there's a big gap over there, because some of them, really don't understand what these people are going through. Now, from most conversations that I have, or most of my coaching sessions that I see, is I wish there was someone who would listen to me, at least listen to me. Doing the next thing or taking action is the next step, but is there someone to listen to me at least? And that is what I feel is a big challenge in today's workplace.
Amazingly put again. And it's the thing that you just mentioned, right? So it's what are the low-hanging fruits for, say, people of certain vintage to say, like, how do I deal with younger cohorts? Like, I have a new graduation batch coming in. What are they expecting? They want to talk about wellness. And of course, they have quotation marks around it, or frown a little bit, roll their eyes and say like, oh, this is what we have to do. But that's not true, right? It's not about wellness, but about when I say something, can I be heard? Or do you,
Yeah.
and how do I know that you've heard me? It's like, do you react to what I have just said, right? So I get that perspective, right? And I absolutely believe that, there could be two extremes and the solutions don't come from extremes. They always meet in the middle and the solutions always come from the center. So that is something that we can all take aside. Now, Tejaswini, if I could ask you to come off mute, and I have a question for you. Question I was going to put to you is that we were referring to this particular data set that we were reflecting on. So Gen Z in India isn't waiting for, say, graduation. They are not waiting to get work X. We see that they are volunteering, shaping their career in real time, looking for opportunities to sort of carve their own path. What does that tell us about the values, or rather, I should ask you, what should that tell us about the values that I've just spoken of? And do you see in your experience institutions respond to those values in a meaningful way?
That's a very, very large question to answer for a very little person of my age, I would say. If I had to put it very nicely, a lot of these things actually vary from how have you seen money in your life. Or money is a very loose term here. A lot of these factors actually stem from financial independence. Because if you look at it, even though my parents' generation or generation, basically all of y'all who are here, who have had kids of my age, or maybe here and there, plus five, minus five, and I'm going to be nice about it. So all of you have had a sense of money, understanding the value of money. For us, money is about financial independence. For me, the job that I'm doing is not giving me a huge amount of freedom. No, it's just giving me enough that I can buy what I want and live on what I want. While this is also helping my CV and my other factors. And for us, saving, so I was having a lunch with my friend recently, a very quick anecdote here. We were not talking about what's going on with her personal life. We were talking about, have you invested in stocks? Have you invested in savings account? Have you have a checking account? Kind of that stuff. That's more important to us. If you talk to anybody, I have met my cousins who are 5 years younger than me. The conversations we have is, did you invest in SBI ka stock? Did you invest in Nifty? Did you go into the ICHL ka stock? We discuss stocks because for us, we realize that the value of money depreciates with every second. And given the unstable economic structures, I mean, there are several factors for it. There's global system, economics, and all things you guys are better than me in understanding. These factors play a major role for us to understand these processes and forces us in a way to be more financially stable in our own lives. And plus, we don't know how long we're going to live. So my priority at this point of time is to have a good savings account so that I can go on a trip with my friends and enjoy my life. Other thing, also I lost the other question. See, that's just Gen Z. We just talk what's relevant to us.
It's not just Gen Z. It would happen to me as well. Sometimes I just love the sound of my own voice and I forget what was asked of me, right? So it happens a lot. But the question, you're on point.
I wish I could know the sound of my voice. I don't hear.
No, it's not perfect. I was talking about me, of course, not you. So what I'm trying to say is that you are reflecting on the points I mentioned. There is aspiration. There is aspiration for doing better, doing well, and also whatever you make, you want to retain the value of it. You're not thinking about just making money. You want money that has value, that will give you independence. So I get that. Second part of the question was, when you work with institutions like MICA or, your other associations, whether it's outside of your education or work, do you see institutions responding to these aspirations that are helping you achieve what you really want to achieve from your life?
See, it depends on your long-term goal, honestly speaking. If I am someone who wants me to go to academia, MICA is a good place. Whereas if someone who's not looking into academia but is looking for a transitional phase where they're figuring out do they want to stay into a particular field or they do want to step out into a full-fledged corporate situation, this is also a good spot to be in. Transitional jobs is what we use this word for such situations. Plus, institutions respond to people like my generation well, because I have to put it very nicely. I'm sorry, ma'am, if you take offense to it, but please don't kill me when next time I visit you for a meeting. If we protect our peace, the institutions respond to our peace, is what I'm going to use the word here. If I refuse to work after a certain point of time because it's beyond my skill set or it's beyond the scope of my workforce nature, they cannot make me do it, because it's very clearly I can say that a no is something that we have learned very quickly to say. And in my mother's word, all you know is how to say a no, you don't know how to respond with a yes. Is something she's been trying to teach me her entire life. Start to try with a yes, which doesn't happen for us. I will not work beyond my work hours. I will not entertain a student also beyond my working hours, because that's my way of protecting myself. If I say start saying yes to all of these things, people will start taking us for granted. And that's what not happening in these kinds of places. Even as a student, if I said no to something, my supervisor won't force me. And that's what's happening in all of these kinds of workforces. My friends who work in like different institutions, like corporate, full-fledged corporate institutions, they've also had resorted to these kinds of method where they have said no to certain time frames, and their managers, bosses have responded really well to this. So yeah, that's just happens with time. You have to like maintain your peace, the world will protect.
Absolutely. And I guess what you're talking of is boundaries. And regardless of whose mothers on this panel you speak to, they would have same response in that this person you're talking to has never said yes willingly unless they were coaxed into saying yes. So that's a mother thing. I won't let you take credit for that particular special skill that we all have. It's across generations. But you know what really, really stood out for me is maybe I was born a generation too early. And this is not a unique sentence because many stalwarts before me have said it, right? So I'm like, I am just a small man who's thinking like, wow, people at that age are talking about how to invest, where to invest, where I was more concerned about how can I afford the next big thing that I want to buy, like a car or like an expensive outfit or whatever that was. Keeping with the theme of our discussion today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Ruchi and sort of ask the same question in a different angle. So if we were to follow some of these global headlines and say that, oh, Gen Z is opting out of leadership, they say no a lot, they don't know how to build consensus or whatever we are trying to project onto this particular cohort. In India, do we see this rejection? Of course, we have seen example of it now, but what I'm trying to say is at a mass level, do you see this rejection, redirection, or is this some sort of, is it something else entirely?
So, one, yes, and you put it flat. It's a Western narrative that's coming up. And I'm sure all of us will acknowledge that the Westerners are very good at creating narratives. They live by headlines. So, India had very strong women, but we are not known to be feminists. We've had people who've come out very tough, but we've not created headlines. So that's why I one more time feel that it's just their ability to create headlines, and maybe somebody who's really lived a little bit of life past 52, I feel they're quick at announcing headlines and therefore they're able to make newer headlines fast. But this has always been the case that change is imperative and change has to be accepted. But it was just when women were joining workforces, it just seemed the glass ceiling happening, family structure changing, society changing. But it's all been a part of our existence. And I look at this as one more of so. But in India, it's distinctly different. And why do I say that? Why do I say that? I say that because we're a country which adapts and creates our new version. Right. And I'll give you cases of so many of these youngsters working. And the example that I'm giving to you is a very cultural related to workplace. I wear a lot of saris to work. And every time I wear a sari to work, a lot of people will say, looks like this generation was the last one because it's extremely cumbersome to see someone travel and drive in a sari. And it's never going to happen again. And believe me, for the last 10 years, I've had different new generation come in. And they'll come back and say, ma'am, you know what? Sari is my favorite dress and I love to wear it. And I've taken so many of my mother's saris also. And I'm trying to pick that. And that to me is an indication that nothing is dying. We're only adopting and adapting. Maybe going ahead, the new generation is wearing a pre-stitched sari, but the love for the legacy, the desire to be very Indian is distinctly there. So this generation is doing things differently. It's learning a lot of things which are very Indian, maybe lost in knowledge, but available on the internet somewhere. They're still Googling to say what's a good puja process to follow. And then the puja is a fast forward puja, but are they relinquishing it? The answer is no. So the short of the very long thing that I'm saying is that in India, there is a Gen Z, there is a method, which is changing, but it's changing in a very Indian way. And I think the responsibility is upon people like me who should begin to record it and have been recording it. And I'm looking at a lot of more white papers coming in, books coming in, which are talking of the Indian phenomenon of this Gen Z. And let me pick up from what Tejaswini mentioned. This saving, we save. A generation earlier, we saved. They're saving to say, when can I have my new vacation? We saved probably sometimes just mindlessly because we knew it's good to save. And then when we thought we've got enough money, we bought something out of it. And probably that gave me the well-being which a vacation gives to this generation. So did we care about well-being? Yes. But the tool to that well-being was a very different tool, because this generation comes with a lot of tangible products of the phones and the designer brands that's been provided. And the previous generation had to buy it. That's one change. And I think that's across all cultures, across all ethnicities. It's just about how do we, and I connect to where you started, Nilesh, that was a beautiful start. We're in a different point globally in terms of aspirations. And therefore, traveling abroad was not even an aspiration of people from my generation, because it was just about getting that video cassette to watch George Michael and then get a peep into what it meant to go abroad and then hear from your relatives over there. But now it's a reality. And now they travel. And the beautiful thing that I feel people of my generation are doing, and I don't know which from the A to the Z that I belonged to, they're willing to adapt, open out, and travel with click pictures, create reels, flood Insta, even at the cost of spamming and sometimes getting this generation to leave those platforms. They're learning. So it's important to pay an equal attention to that generation which has changed and is changing, which is the previous generation. I think overdue attention to this Gen Z is troublesome to me. I feel the attention has to be holistic and with everybody.
And that's where I want to bring in the whole multi-generational aspect of my first questions, right? The reason why we're focusing on Gen Z so much is because they are our future, right? What I mean by that is these are the people who will be making decisions in coming years that will impact our lives as well, right? We will have sort of moved on towards midlife and end of career sort of phase, and we could become those old sages with, our stories and our portfolios, and we open it and give them more anecdotes and examples from it. But I wanted to.
But you know what, Nilesh, I'll just get in.
Sure.
This is also a generation that is so morbid that they say we don't know how long we're going to live, and we are an over-optimistic generation which knows just do a little more yoga and you will survive and carry on.
The only day you have to worry about is today. It's like, because that's it. What will happen tomorrow? You do not know. Now, while having said that, I wanted to reflect on what you said, this whole distinction between Western versus India, and the generational shift that has happened through these cohorts, right? Where what my parents' generation considered aspiration was taken for granted by.
Yeah.
And say, you talked about buying a cassette, which was George Michael. I'm sure you must have spent at least 25% of your monthly salary to buy that one cassette because that was expensive. I remember that was a case with, I wanted to get a Sony Discman, not Walkman.
Yeah.
And that costed me my 3 months salary, but that was an aspiration. And now all of that fits in a tiny thumb drive or a phone, and you can have songs that will last you to your journey to Mars and back. But what I wanted to bring on is that, the whole feminism perspective as well. When people talk about, feminism, you use Western standards to qualify Indian feminism. It's not going to fit because we were way ahead of it. We don't have a Madonna concept. We have a Durga concept, right? So the whole thing about we don't project something onto our women. We expect them to be, we revere them to be powerful as well. So we know the forms of it. So that's just philosophical ethos.
No, Nilesh, I wouldn't even use the word revere very honestly. What I would put in here is, and maybe it's an academician in me, we've got the multiplicity of roles, and we are therefore very open to accept the diverse manifestations of each human being, from Durga to the other one as well, who's willing to sacrifice a little to get the house in order. And we've got all of that. It's just that we are called out for one band and not even recognized for the other. That, to me, I think from the Western perspective, I think that's problematic.
Perfect. Using that as a segue, I'm going to talk about aspiration just a little bit, like, the generational tension. So what I was going to do specifically is look at learning credentials. So I am looking for my questions for Ganesh. I'm sorry, we lost you there for a minute, Ganesh. So question to you is, are generational clashes real in your experience? What I mean by that is, are we mistaking personality or privilege for age difference? Because what certain levels of professions will be able to easily afford, certain levels are not there yet. So that is a clash there, right? So are we just saying that, because there is a distance to power, because you can talk about Gallup's strengths, how quickly and easily will you be able to exercise those strengths if you are a recent grad who's just been inducted into Accenture versus someone who has been there for 20 years and is now like, a managing director or whatever?
Okay, I think it is all to do with awareness, the kind of exposure that you, which I see a lot more in the current generation. In terms of understanding their own strengths report, the current generation understands it better compared to what I see, someone who's been there for ages, who's still figuring it out. I still wonder, what are you figuring it out? Because sometimes, when I ask them questions, we are so conditioned to, because Gallup Strength talks about talking about your top 5 strengths. Okay, that is what you're looking at. And here you have someone who first asked me, so you mean to say I need to ignore my weakness? But Gallup says you look at your strengths, but you don't ignore your weakness, but you see how you can improvise or enhance your strength so that you can balance that out with your weakness, because your weakness is any which ways it's going to be there. Your strength also can be a weakness sometimes. Okay, so there are certain nuances that is there in Gallup Strength. We call a balcony and basement. So what is good as your strength can be a basement which does not work really well. So keeping that in mind, I feel activating your strength is something which I see can be a challenge, in certain generation, whereas the newer generation, because they are able to understand concepts better and they are able to apply it. It's just a matter of how it so happens that sometimes I see in certain teams that the team members are much more activated when it comes to strength compared to the bosses or the leaders in the team. So that's a big challenge, is because that person has conditioned himself for something else, whereas these generation people, they're focused only on those three and saying, hey, if this is what, like, my top strength is talking about, say influencing. So I know how to influence, and there is, under that domain, there are certain strengths which I would use. Now, the older generation, or the certain generation of leaders that we see, is they want to focus more on what is what they can apply into their roles. Like, say for example, say there is a team that does a lot of number crunch. They assume that the entire team should have strengths of in that domain, which is not what Gallup says. Gallup says use whatever strengths, your top 5 strengths, which is your natural strength, use that to apply to your. So that is where I see as a clash, when some people say, hey, you don't have this strength, so I don't want to reach out to you. Whereas that person says, no, I have some other strengths which I can apply and I can make this look better. So this is what is my learning, at least in few of those teams that I work with, or I coach them, or when I do some group coaching versus individual coaching, this is what comes.
All right. So you're saying that we do tend to compartmentalize, and we refer to maybe the language issue, the way people perceive these languages. It's like, strengths-based conversation is something you have to orient yourself to have, and focusing on your strengths. So I get that perspective. Absolutely. I also feel that, a lot of these psychometric models can specifically be, again, very, very West leaning. So it does not consider the whole ethos of doing business with different cultures, because I've had similar challenges in Singapore and in, Indochina region, where people specifically talk a certain speak, they have corporate lingo. And when they turn around and go, it's completely different. They all operate different as strength, because now they don't have to project or fit themselves into a box. Like, I don't want to fit myself in a mold that I will not be able to. But when I go to work, I have to talk like this because that's what people do. I said that. Let's just open this now. Like, context is everything, right? So open to all, and maybe we will all reflect on this question just a little bit. So, have you ever felt misunderstood by someone from another generation? And what happened, or what did it reveal to you? It doesn't have to be a person of a certain age. Their thinking could be of a different um, um, it could belong to a different time in your perspective, and you felt that way. Therefore, that this person could be like, your contemporary, like same age as you, but talks like his father or grandfather, right? So, have you ever had that experience? So, let's go to Tejaswini.
I laugh about it first for like a couple of seconds because it is something that has happened to me my entire I would not say the life because I don't know. But for a good amount of my academic journey, I can say just about humanly. I want to quote ma'am here because she mentioned about the narratives that have been there predominantly here. One of the thing, maybe it's again a generational thing, or maybe a training thing, or a lot of several factors I'd like to zoom. As a woman, I would use this perspective here instead of a generation, because I think women and generation go together in terms of narratives and how we are perceived with. As a woman, it's a great experience to be a generation. You can call out just about anybody for doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, I would still say our generation is adapted to the new aspect and new developments of which women are going through, like maybe calling out a no, or calling out people in general, or having our own boundaries. But we're not attuned to that idea altogether again yet. My subordinates at work, not here, but any other place I worked in, they get used to the idea that I'm a generational woman, I'm a feminist, I have like different perspectives. All those things they'll take it. But there's also a pinch of salt that they have in them because they've been trained entire lives that, women can do this, but at the same time, a burden of load goes more to them as compared to us. There's always that factor. And a lot of times, as a woman, I would say, I still subconsciously do those things which I shouldn't be doing because, like, picking up after people, that's not my job. They are like, it's just not for men, it's just for women also. Like, it's not my job to do that. But subconsciously, I see my colleagues like doing it together with us. Not because we're trained to do that. We've seen that, we've imbibed it, and that's what it is. It's like we're blending in two things at the same time, as ma'am pointed out. With both narratives, like women loving sari, maybe we're going pre-stitched saris, but at the same time, I'm also picking out mentally where the block is happening in my life. So yeah, that is there. And one of the primary things misunderstood generationally, I mean, that is gonna happen. One thing I have a background in humanities, so my experiences are very different in terms of perception lenses. I would use the word here. One of the things I have noticed is your generation, not your generation, my parents' generation, and before that generation, their challenges were finding a house, basically roti, kapda, makan, and all that kind of things, like a shelter, a good amount of savings. What they could earn right now, they had a house at that point. I don't even have a house. I am living in a rented space, is what it is. But my priorities are not this. My priority is to maintain the lifestyle that my parents gave me and make sure that my mental health is good. My challenges are not about tangible structural issues of my life. Maybe a house is a priority, but it's not there yet because I know I'm not in a good mental headspace. Maybe I'm battling with several health issues. Mental health issues is very common within our generation. For us, that is the priority, to fix that so that when you're living in a good space, I need to make that space my space. Living in a distorted space does not make sense to us. And that's what something the generation previous to us do not understand. I would not say the word. They're not able to get through that concept. They're like, get a house, get this sorted. But for us, that's not the priority. If I am having a massive breakdown somewhere, my house cannot provide me comfort. Maybe spending money on something that can provide me comfort would make sense to me. That's what I would believe in terms of, like misunderstood experiences. Rather, misinterpreted experience would be the word here for us, because priorities change with life. I think my parents' priority is to make sure that I am good enough in the world that I am and maintaining the lifestyle. If I can afford, if they can make sure I can afford like a certain amount of money every month, expenses that I do, their priority is to make sure that when I take a job or when I work in my life, I am able to make sure that above and beyond that it is. Because every parent's, I think everybody's goal is to be better than what they are. So I think that is what one thing I would use the word is rather than misunderstood, it's more misinterpreted because of, perception is the word I'm going to use.
You're very eloquent in contextualizing your answers. It reflects very well on you and your parents and your teachers, I must tell. But what I'm trying to get at is I would reflect on this because think about it this way. Like, I have a very close friend. He's my age. He's literally a month older but he works in a different industry. He has an emergency, and the medical education over here is quite tight. So you're in college until like you're 33 or 35, and then you start working, right? But you're working. But he tells me the last 7 or 8 years, he's not had a single sick day. And I was like, why are you measuring everybody else like me? Because I was telling me that because I had taken a sick day that day. I'm like, I'm a knowledge worker. I use this thing in my head a lot. You are on your feet, you use your head a lot as well. But why are you assessing my ability with your standards, which are hard for me to meet? You work one day, then take one day off. Work one day and they take one day off. Like, and he works every alternate days. I don't have that ability to sort of decompress every other day, right? So for me, it's like 5 days of marathon, and then I get 2 days, and then it feels like those 2 days have just gone away. So that's what I was referring to as an example to say that, someone could be your cohort, like contemporary, but has a different value system that they are aspiring to, and therefore hold you to that value system. So Ganesh, Ruchi, please chime in. Like, do you have experience where you were misunderstood by either a thinking of a different generation or a person of a different generation?
I would say from the same gender. Yeah, because I remember, just a few years ago, not few years, just 3-4 years ago, before COVID, I was doing career counseling for college students, and I was doing this career guidance for this college. They were finishing their +2, and after my career guidance, there was a parent who walked, and she said, "I want to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, tell me, what is it?" And she said, "Whatever you said right now is totally incorrect. I feel, this is not something that you're supposed to do as a career counselor. You're brainwashing." Okay. So I said, "In what way, if I may ask?" Then she said, "No, you told so many things to them right now. I mean, you gave them so many career options, and you again putting them into a." I said, "Okay, now can you tell me what your child wants to do after the +2?" And she said, "Oh, now that's a problem. We have already planned this, and now we have given her more ideas. And today I'm going to go back home and I'm going to face her, and that's going to be a problem." So I said, "See, that's a problem because you've already planned for her, and that's why you're not giving her the liberty to make her choice. Because end of the day, if she's getting more options, why not? It may be something better." And she felt that something which I told did not make sense to her as a parent. So where that I know this lady because I know she is my classmate's sister who's 2 years younger to me. Okay, but she didn't recognize me. Can happen where they can think.
Great example, Ganesh. And we all, the moment you said, we all instantly reflected. I saw Ruchi as well. Like, we both rolled eyes saying, like, oh, we recognize that. We've experienced that as well, right? And what Ruchi was mentioning earlier, like, having the rigidity of structure or following a certain mold. No, 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 no. If you're not going to confirm all my biases by giving options only that I approve of, I am not going to be with you, or I'm going to tell you often that you are stepping over your line. What is your experience in this?
So there it is, Nilesh, because I work with a generation that's only getting younger by every new batch that I get in. And I'm hugely misunderstood by the next generation all the time. Because just like we've been saying, and we have been saying that we've been living in molds, this current generation also likes to typify that generation. And somehow, because I've been dealing with every new generation, there's the updated version of me that gets back to class because I've worked. So every time I get to class, for example, and I have young boys also at home, same age, 25, 27. So I live with them virtually. So when I'm introducing myself, for example, I ride a, so if I get to campus on bike, then for all the students, it's like, how can she do it? You know, that's not her generation. The car I drive is a, so as a woman, you don't do that, right? You don't wear a big bindi and a sari and you drive a car, not allowed. So a lot of them, they'll reach out and say, ma'am, you drive a Thar? Yes. This is so cool, you know? And then when you're talking to them, and that's when they realize that, oh, yeah, their mothers, they and it's a lovely discomfort to see what they experience, because in their heads they've seen several like that, and then they come into, and I'm sure this happens in a lot of educational institutions which are professional education institutions or organizations which are flatter, forward. They're coming with this mindset saying they will be judged, others are going to hold tight rules for them. And so, one more example, I never give deadlines to my students. I tell them this is the date when I submit my marks. I need 10 days to evaluate. You will have to submit by this. So, nobody comes to me saying we want an extension because it's not a deadline. It's a timeline we've agreed. So, one lesson that I have picked up is that if we are using appropriate words and a vocabulary that rightly describes the experience, I think the understanding is much. So I have ensured very often that this barrier is by just trying to encapsulate or articulate my expectations, since I teach them, my expectations out of the learner in the vocabulary that fits them. So they hate the word deadline. But if you get to the spirit of why a deadline, it's to meet a goal. So let's come together. We've got to meet the goal. You need the grades. I need the time to evaluate. We decide and we collaborate, come together and come to a consensus, and it's happily accepted. Then it's not seen as a deadline because you've really opened out to say, this is the reason. Because to be fair to the previous generation, not everything was done because it passed on. There was value, whether it's discipline, whether it's order, whether it's punctuality. There was a purpose for which it happened. And I think it's a responsibility for all of us who worked a little longer than the next generation joining in, is to also explain the rationale for which it was there. The problem is if we just put it as a, there's no, but if we explain the merit, I think they're good. At least their openness to bite on that is definitely there. So that I think is one misunderstood. Both because of this approach, I'm often also misunderstood by my generation, saying you're trying to act too cool, you're trying to fit into them. But it's just finding my mechanism to get along. And sometimes, to be very confessional, Nilesh, I make an attempt to be misunderstood because that's my defense mechanism. Not everybody then really comes close to talk to you because then they're like, oh, she is this sort. It really works for me. It saves me a lot of time. It saves me a lot of explanation. So it's also one of my tools of interpersonal, strategic tools of interpersonal interaction.
How amazing. The last bit that you covered, I was literally going to say that. And maybe that's your strategy. But you acknowledged it yourself, because it is sometimes, and being the kind of person people we are, right? But I feel, and this is the bridge, right? Younger generations expect older generations to be a bit more fungible, adaptable. And I guess the generation that sits between, mid 70s, early 80s to about 2000s are the most adaptable generation because they have constantly navigated two different spectrums. So we are the middle,
Yes.
for two extremes, right? Absolutely. But I'm going to give you an anecdote. My godmother, she's 19 years older than me. And this was 2006. And we were at a bar we were at Shiraz. And me and my friend very jokingly said, oh my God, what are these ladies doing here? They're wearing saris and having a drink. They were having the little and we were just like, you need to have a dress code. You should be wearing Western outfits to come and drink at a bar, right? But again, we both come from different mindsets. Our mothers were like that. So of course we had that. And the way my godmother was offended by that comment was like, do you think you invented fashion, your generation? No. So the next day was a Diwali party at my apartment. She and all her friends got dressed in the most traditional saris. They wore madisar and 9 yards and whatnot. And they showed up and they're like, you are going to make drinks for us and you're making margaritas and cosmos and we're going to drink it wearing these madisars. So we had a gala time, but that was a lesson in how to be a constructive rebellion, right? So we all want to be misunderstood so that we can teach a lesson and let people have a memory saying that do not generalize, right? So I absolutely love this whole conversation that we've had today. We're at the top of the hour. So what I'm going to do is thank Let's Talk kind of pulling this question up, this theme together, because I think the conversation is to be had is yes, there are trends, and yes, there are a lot of insights that come out of different segments of corporate world. And because sometimes we are such a global um, economy, we reflect on things that we can get from other economies and other perspectives, and say like, how can we make this our own? So I would look forward to what's coming out from you, Ruchi. You said that you're documenting a lot of this. Would love to read that and see that it comes out in different ways. And same thing for Let's Talk. We are going to publish a white paper on this specific topics. It gives us good data set in terms of what is it that India is doing in this area, or what are corporates in India doing? What are their challenges? What are the easy and quick wins for them? And of course, we're all part of it. So thank you for making time, especially Tejaswini, for jumping onto this last minute and giving us such great gems in this conversation. And thanks, Ganesh, for bringing your very unique perspective as well. So until we meet